And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papad, and this is Fermenting Opinions, the podcast and hangout show in search of a more palatable political ferment. Here I have my panelists, RJ, Richard, Haley, Brian, and Warren are joining us, and we're going to be talking about the verdicts in the Ahmed Aubrey murder and the Kyle Rittenhouse killings, we'll call it. So both of these have come out now. I think the Rittenhouse verdict came out about a week or so ago. Hang on a second. I got to mute him. Got to mute Warren. He probably didn't realize he was talking to his wife. Anyway, so Rittenhouse got off. A lot of people on the left were outraged, shocked, upset, called the judge biased, and so on and so forth. And again, a few days, a week later, we have the verdicts in the Aubrey case where all three were found guilty of at least felony murder, and I want to get into that when we get over to that part of the show. But there was malice murder, which I didn't get to look up, versus felony murder versus some other charges. They all got something. But only one of the defendants got malice murder, and I kind of wanted to ask about that. Just to kind of educate the people and myself in the process. But anyway, what else is there to say about Rittenhouse with regards to the verdict that kind of already hasn't been said? Everyone's done the media outrage thing, and I see him as probably the next. Sorry, somebody's calling me. Man, I can't talk to him now. You're laughing, RJ. Was the verdict bad? Were the jurors just overly biased? Was there something that got messed up? Who has sort of an objection, I think, to how that went out? I guess is where I would start.
Yeah, I think that the problem with the Rittenhouse verdict is not the verdict, and it's not the way that the jurors necessarily treated the facts as they were presented to them, but it's the law. Because at the end of the day, I find it difficult to believe that we can't mostly agree in society that we shouldn't be encouraging the sort of actions that Kyle Rittenhouse took that night. And yet we've said they're perfectly legal. So the problem there is the law itself. Some of that is tied up in what has been increasingly over the last couple decades in America, this push toward stand your ground laws. Wisconsin doesn't have one, but it does have this very broad self-defense law.
Mm-hmm.
And that self-defense law is essentially what got Kyle Rittenhouse off. It said, in sort of a negative way, if the state can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't acting in self-defense, reasonably acting to protect his own life by using lethal force, then he has an affirmative defense against using lethal force, which he did twice, and he shot another person who did not die. I don't think that should be the law. If it is the law, which it appears to be, I mean, that's what happened in this case, then we probably ought to change the laws. My suggestion to that would be that we go back to common law self-defense, which is if you are threatened, you need to attempt to retreat, and you can only use lethal force if you can't retreat. I don't see a whole lot of ways in between where we are and where what I'm suggesting is, because I simply can't understand how reasonable people can say that what Kyle Rittenhouse did, which was a undisputed fact, traveled across state lines, ostensibly to be a medic and to protect property with a lethal weapon.
Which you can't do.
He didn't travel across the state line with the lethal weapon. That's a technicality, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
Can I touch on one point real quick before I let you get back to it?
oh, yeah.
People, I've seen a lot of punditry on the right going, "Oh, they're making such a big deal about crossing state lines. Why is that legally important? Whether or not you cross state lines potentially in the commission of a crime?"
Well, it can be. If he
Right.
had crossed state lines with the gun, for example, that
Yeah.
would be a statutory violation.
Not necessarily.
Okay, not necessarily, but in his case, it would have been. With that gun with him, would you agree?
No,
Why not?
because Wisconsin doesn't have such a prohibition. You're talking about a federal prohibition or the imposition of a state restriction. And although Illinois does have certain restrictions on make and model, Wisconsin does not have a restriction on make and model. And to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing in Title 18 USC that says you can't carry a Type 1 firearm across a Title 1 firearm across state lines. Now, the fact that he was a minor at the time, that comes into play, but that's not part of Title 18.
Okay, but you would agree that
So-
it would potentially be a violation of statutory law for him to do so.
I think you'd have to find the statute that it violates. I think that what you're doing here is setting up very much a red herring. The crossing state lines is a complete red herring in this case. It's meaningless.
Well, right, because it didn't happen. We already stipulated.
Yeah, I was saying that why people brought it up as relevant is the initial, for whatever reason, if it was a bogus narrative, whatever, that he was in possession of a firearm that he shouldn't have had and then cross state lines with it, that would incur, to my understanding, some kind of additional charges. That's why people kept harping on it. Turns out that wasn't the case, but that was because of a weird reading of the law in Wisconsin, where, like, in terms of minors possessing firearms or deadly weapons, but then there's like very specific requirements with regards to what kind of firearms you could or could not have, but it was like applied very broadly. Say Rittenhouse showed up to this thing with a katana and, cut somebody's head off kind of thing. He would have been in violation of that law for having the katana, necessarily for cutting someone's head off with it, because self-defense, right? But for a firearm of the long barrel nature or whatever length of the barrel it is, that it didn't qualify under this other little weird subsection. So it was a weird reading of the law. It was kind of intended to prevent minors from running around with weapons, deadly weapons. But because of this weird reading, it was like saying, well, no, he is technically okay in this way. I think that comes down to interpretation of the law.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't think
it doesn't. It's an exception. It's a statutory exception.
Okay.
I don't think it was a weird reading of the law. I think it was a poorly written law. I think it's pretty clear what the law is.
On that, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the law pretty clearly was supposed to mean something.
Yeah.
But as written, it did not mean whatever it was intended. And that's why I think the judge in that case correctly dismissed that charge.
Yeah.
Because if a long-barreled rifle is able to be carried by a 16 or 17-year-old, which it appears from the statute they are, then you're not in violation of that statute. I mean, it's like, as Ryan said, it's an exception.
We're lawyers. We have to be specific. There's no such thing as a long barrel rifle. All rifles that are 16.1 inches or greater are Title I weapons under the National Firearms Act, 1934.
Okay.
Weapons which have a rifle barrel and a barrel that's less than 16.1 inches, measured from the beginning of the chamber to the end of the tip of the barrel, to the crown of the barrel, fall under Title II of the NFA. They're considered short-barreled rifles, and they're regulated by federal law, have been since 1934. A number of states also regulate them. So had it been a short-barreled rifle to begin with, it would have been a short-barreled rifle. There's only short-barreled rifles and everything else.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying that. But I guess let me revise the point I was trying to make in light of new information and feedback, that it's not a weird reading of the law. It's a weird law that somehow allows somebody to carry this, would you say, a Class 1 rifle? Class 1 fire, Title I rifle, firearm, what have you, is okay, but not okay to carry a katana or a ninja star or nunchucks or brass knuckles or something like that. Like, that's not okay, but this kind of rifle is okay per the law. It's weird. It's not a weird reading of the law. Everybody good with that?
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
Cool. All right. So that was that point. And we also addressed the other thing about crossing state lines. The other thing I wanted to bring up with regards to this case was, and I'm glad there's lawyers here to correct me. There was a point about, and I'm trying to get this correct from my understanding. Again, being a dilettante and not a lawyer, that there was an element of provocation that what the prosecution was pushing for, provocation with a firearm, and then you lose sort of the I'm gonna screw up the legalese here, but basically, like, you don't get away with provoking somebody by, like, waving a gun at them and then shooting them when they come after you, is what I'm trying to say. Like, unless ... like, there is that legitimate risk to your own life that would meet a reasonable standard. Is this resonating with anybody here?
If I may, what you're discussing is termed in Louisiana as the aggressor doctrine.
Okay.
And the aggressor in an incident cannot claim self-defense. Provocation would be part of the aggressor doctrine. What happened in the Rittenhouse case, however, is, one, there was no evidence of it, okay, and two, there was no imminence. And imminence is mandatory for the aggressor doctrine. I can't tell you, David, I'm going to shoot you in an hour. And then you go, well, I've got to kill you now.
I'll kill you in 30 minutes.
There's no or it's free. There's no imminent. There's no imminence. Without a reasonable belief of imminent death or great bodily harm. Imminence is an incredibly important factor.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I was interested in that because I've listened to, I guess, sort of several legally oriented podcasts and things about it, and they brought that up where they thought that there was definitely going to be, that was going to come out differently because of that element, and it clearly didn't. And I think a lot of people, particularly on the left, got caught flat-footed with it. You heard my prognostication the last time we did the show. I said, oh, look at, he's taking the stand. He's probably going to walk. I was right about that. I might not have been right for good reasons, but I was. Anyway, does anybody else have any other thoughts or follow-up or anything like that? Richard, sir.
Hey, just for people who don't know, I work in the counterterrorism field, and with that comes community resilience. So I work with a lot of law enforcement and emergency management and private industry owners. And so I've been doing this for 26 years. And from our perspective, when we talk about anybody who's going to take a weapon into a riot, and so this is coming from police officers and business owners and people who work in security, all their lives. Don't ever, this is the message I want everybody to get out to the young bucks out there who are watching the news and they've seen Kyle become a hero. And they hear all these things about looters around the country attacking Home Depots and stuff. Try and share this message. Don't ever take a rifle into a riot. I don't care if the federal government, I don't care if Trump becomes president again and the federal government calls you a hero for doing it and they change the laws and they order you to do it. Don't ever take a rifle into a riot with the intention to protect the community. If you haven't got documented coordination with the private business owners that you're trying to protect, that you haven't let law enforcement know where you are, that you have authorization, that you're registered with your weapon, that you're trained to operate a weapon in a riot. All these basic principles and guidelines and standards that I would have expected conservatives to just run with up and down the street for the past year and saying, okay, we don't agree that Kyle was this horrible, domestic terrorist Nazi. We don't agree with that. However, we're not going to aggrandize him because there are some very serious standards that all young men need to know before you go try to be a hero. And here they are. Very, very few conservatives have taken that banner up except for me. I don't mean it like that. There's in my little community on Facebook and social media, most of my conservative friends would much rather just make Kyle out to be a hero and, the world is falling apart and thank God for Kyle and all that. Very, very few people in my little social circle have been willing to take that stand. Now at work, at my office, we're all pretty much in agreement. No matter what the law is, every young buck who is thinking about being a hero and stepping up, first of all, what a noble idea to take an interest in your community. Second of all, apply for security jobs at Home Depot. Talk to your local police officers and see what opportunities there are for you to be helpful to the law enforcement. Don't just take a rifle into a riot. And here's why: if you take a rifle into a riot without following those steps that I just mentioned, you're gonna create more damage for your community. You're actually going to bring damage to your community. You might be called a hero, but that's only going to be because narratives are so powerful.
Mm.
You might be, you might get to meet the president, but you are risking damage to your community. So if community safety is your thing and community protection is your thing, then take those standards and those principles. And that should be a nationwide lesson for everybody. And I hope that everybody who listens to this will push that. By all means, change the laws, but we should be pushing that. If you take a rifle into a riot, you're actually risking damage to your community rather than protecting things. It's not as simple as just, hey, I took an action. I was willing to take a stand. People weren't doing enough, so I did it. That's actually going to be damaging to the community. So I've been pushing that left and right. That's been my sermon for the past year, and I wanted to push that here too.
Strongly agree. It's just kind of the next level of the good guy with the gun type theory, isn't it? I mean, I was saying I am here even separate from all the narratives, right? Assuming he had the absolute best of intentions, somebody with his qualifications is only going to make the situation worse, and that's something we should all be able to acknowledge. And he did. People died where they may not have otherwise.
Or at least in pure risk analysis, you are definitely raising the risk to damage if you bring a rifle in. You might beat all the odds and save the day, maybe like Bruce Willis, but chances are you're going to bring more damage. And so statistically, he fell into that statistical range of.
I think whoever owned Nakatomi Plaza probably wouldn't agree, but the property management company was not happy.
Hey, Richard, what you say makes perfect sense. Amen to it. But contextually, as I understand it, Rittenhouse was actually complimented by or thanked by the police for being involved. And also, if you have a governor that's turning down federal assistance, so the police are undermanned given the level of violence and rioting, and the police are like, well, better to have some vigilantes than have nothing at all. So was that a part of it? I'm just trying to understand the full messy story context.
Well, I have no doubt that there are police, and even here in Arizona, we have police that watch Tucker Carlson every night. And I've got FBI agents that I work with who aren't sure that the FBI isn't behind January 6th. Because
what?
Wow. That's scary.
I'm sorry.
So
was it me?
There's probably, there's police officers, people who have watched Tucker Carlson and they've fallen into that narrative. And so they praise Kyle because that's what you do. And so maybe from a perspective, if you're a police officer and you're frustrated with riots and you're frustrated with your governor, you might speak up, but the chief of police didn't thank him. People who have a responsibility, ultimately, the chief of police and the governor and all them, they're responsible for the community protection. And there is risk analysis that you conduct that says, how are we going to protect this community during a riot? If they do nothing, and here's another thing, if people say, well, what if, we're at the end of the earth and it's all apocalyptic now and there is no law, then okay, forget what I just said. But if there's any kind of law and you're not at the end of the world, don't take a rifle into a riot. And if it is the end of the world, then take your rifle and go stand in front of your house. Maybe work with your neighbors and protect your street. Don't go protect a used car dealership at the end of the world. And if it's not the end of the world, then do these things that I said. And, I'm sure there are police officers who are like, oh, thank God for Kyle. But that's different than the chief of police saying, we failed and thank you for Kyle Rittenhouse. That's probably never going to happen. And going forward, even if we end up making statues to Kyle Rittenhouse, going forward, please, everybody, tell their young guys and their community, hey, I appreciate you for wanting to protect your community, but do not do that. That is very, very, very dangerous. You could have been killed. You could have killed more people. Out of those 3 people that got shot by him, I would say only one was looking for trouble. The other 2 seemed to think that he was an active shooter.
Yeah.
The first one thought, oh, you're Mr. Big Guy, and thought he would man up to him and chose badly. But the other two probably thought he was an active shooter, and they were trying to be the heroes, and
Yeah.
they just
I
didn't have.
I thought in the case of is it Grosskreutz, the guy who got his arm blown
Grosskreutz.
off, yeah, that
Yeah.
In that situation, if you are regarding him as an active shooter,
100%.
if he, oh, I don't know what that was. If you're regarding him as an active shooter, like who's taking the stand and who's shot and or dead just comes down to, you know, who got there first, basically. If you're both waving guns around, and, you know, is he a threat? Is he a threat? I don't know. Rittenhouse shot first, but like if I was the other guy, I would have felt like this guy just killed two people, or shot, and maybe I didn't even know that, but I know he was shooting, right? And if I see him and I have a gun and I think my life is now in danger, like why wouldn't I just be first, right? I mean, I don't know if the case would have come out any different. Essentially what I'm saying in terms of self-defense.
Sure, yeah. And I think that what you're saying is that,
I mean, obviously
at
not
some
all the
point- no,
details
well,
are
at some
exactly
point,
parallel,
but it doesn't matter. If Grosskreutz would have shot and killed Kyle Rittenhouse, he would have had a self-defense argument,
Yeah.
the same that Kyle Rittenhouse did.
I disagree.
okay.
Why?
Well, you've managed to conflate a number of issues here. We've got the good guy with the gun, we've got the rifle, we've got the public safety. But I think what you need to step back from here is there is no reasonable person who could have thought that he was an active shooter.
He just shot
An
someone.
active shooter.
Yes,
that is someone who shot someone.
One
An
at a time,
active
guys.
shooter continues to shoot. Parkland was an active shooter.
Wait a minute.
Aurora was
Whoa. That's a lot of mental exercises to do in the middle
No,
of
it's
a
not.
riot and a shooting. Yes, it is.
How many times did he fire?
How many times did he fire at who?
8. He fired a
No,
total of
at
8
who?
times.
At who?
No, it doesn't matter. He
It
fired
does.
a total of 8
How
times.
many
An active
times?
shooter continues to fire. An active
Wait,
shooter
that's
continues to fire,
ridiculous.
not retreat.
That is ridiculous. This is the
Give
middle
me a
of
single example to the contrary, because I can give you numerous.
Yeah, okay.
of active shooters.
I can give you a single example to the contrary, which is the example that we're talking about. Because if a reasonable person,
The exception does not prove the rule.
it's not an exception.
It absolutely is.
Nope,
How do you
stop,
save the man who's
Brian,
running away
stop.
as an active shooter?
Stop.
You
If
interrupted
a-
me first.
Stop.
Guys,
If a
You interrupted me
reasonable,
first.
if a reasonable person would have felt that they were in lethal danger, like the third victim certainly could have, and shot Kyle Rittenhouse, he would have a self-defense argument.
The time that he shot him, Kyle had been knocked to the ground. Okay? And how are you
Yes.
going to say that the guy who's doing this, well, he's the aggressor? He's obviously the aggressor.
It's
'cause
not
his
about
back
the aggressor. No,
is to
no.
you.
See, this is now when we talk about conflation, we're not talking
Yes.
about the aggressor doctrine anymore, are we? We're talking
No,
about
you absolutely. If
We're
you're talking
talking
about
about
self-defense, you have to address the aggressor doctrine.
No, we don't. We have to talk about whether a reasonable person would have felt that they were in lethal danger from the person against whom they used lethal force.
And the person
That's
who's
the
on his
law.
back on the ground cannot have been the aggressor.
He shot him in the arm and blew his bicep off. Come on.
While he was pointing a pistol at him.
Yes, he was pointing a pistol at him because he felt that he was in lethal danger. Again, had he shot there, he would absolutely have a self-defense argument under Wisconsin law.
I'm not saying I didn't raise this as he's really the bad guy, like that other guy should have shot him. I'm saying if I was that other person, I would have probably regarded him as lethal a threat as he regarded me in that moment, and it just came down to whoever shot first. That's all I was trying to say.
But
Yeah.
it goes beyond that, though. You have to look at the moment beyond the moment before that moment. That's how the aggressor doctrine works. That's how self-defense
The
works. That's how you
aggressor
actually
doctrine
justify
is not in play.
It absolutely is.
That's a
Because it
Louisiana law. You
initiates
already
self-defense.
said it.
Is that no, that's where provocation comes in under Wisconsin law. Okay, it's the same concept with two different names.
That's not true.
Richard, let's go to
Okay.
Richard. Let's go to Richard, guys. I don't think you guys
Sure.
are going to agree on this.
I just want to say one quick thing, and I'll probably have to back out pretty soon. I was talking about the decision to take a rifle into a riot. You know, I was in the Marines, and if I made a bad decision and I'm suddenly surrounded by people who are coming after me, that's one thing. Once you're surrounded, then, you know, at that point, I could be a little bit more sympathetic. However, I would have said, how did I get here? How did I get in this spot? And in this particular situation, he got in that spot by taking a rifle into a riot. And that's where I would say all the fathers and all the older men out there to tell these young bucks that was his mistake. Even if he's made a hero, even if he becomes president, and you know he might, that was his mistake. And so we have to tell our kids. I've got two daughters, so I probably might not face this, but young men want to be heroes, and it's up to us, the rest of us, to say, "Hey, man, congratulations!" When I told my dad I wanted to be a hero, he walked me to the recruiter's office. You know, get that training, get that certification, get that coordination. Don't take the rifle in there. Once you're surrounded, that's a different thing. But so I'm not going to argue that, you know, he was a monster for shooting those people. And I will say that the second two people that he shot probably thought he was a danger, and when he was running away, that probably built up their confidence that they were going to be heroes. Was it foolish? Absolutely. Everybody who behaved in that scenario behaved very foolishly and you know, like idiots in my point of view. So I wanted to separate that from you know, once they get into the gunfight, who's right and who's wrong. I'm just saying none of them should have taken the steps that they took.
Yeah, and I guess to put a bow on what you're saying, because I know you've got to back out here, Richard, is that you're not making a legal argument. You're just saying, you know, talking about what is wise behavior for, you know, anybody in a situation like that, or if they're even thinking about being in a situation like that.
Right. Don't just jump.
Yeah.
Don't, like in Batman Begins, he's being trained by Liam Neeson, and Liam Neeson says training means nothing. You know, will is everything. The will to act. That is bullshit. No. Train, prepare, study. Don't the Liam Neeson.
Well, you see how that ended for him.
Right.
But
that's all I have.
That's cool. Richard Suttles, by the way, check him out. He also goes by the Faithiest Atheist. Check out his channel and his content and debates and stuff like that he does. Conversations, maybe less than debate. Always great having you on, Richard. So about whenever you need to. But appreciate you chiming in with your 2 cents, sir. I appreciate that wisdom. He was muted. But anyway. Okay. So let's move on. Because I don't think there's much else to hem and haw about. You know, maybe like he said, Rittenhouse will be the next president. You know, that would make some people happy, I'm sure. But I do have to strongly agree with his point here that this will serve to, whether, and it goes against what he was recommending, this will serve to embolden, I think, other people more than likely. And it has to be stressed as well that you cannot use deadly force to protect commercial property, right? Am I getting that right as well? I'm hoping lawyers, but yes,
yeah,
no, maybe.
Yeah, I
okay.
don't think there's any state that supports that.
Okay, cool. So, which is different than protecting your own home, your family, your life, you know, so on and so forth. It's a completely different animal. So, showing up to a riot to protect, you know, a used car lot or whatever it was, like you're already making mistakes. Maybe not necessarily legal mistakes, but they're mistakes.
Similarly, stand your ground laws are not a monolith. So, but
okay.
that's for later.
Sure. Because I think really. We're going into it again a little bit, but like, did he retreat it as far back as he could, as I understand it, that he kind of, you know, and that's why the defense works, is that, you know, he tried to get, oh, I see you put it up there. Cool. That he tried to escape essentially to the point where he couldn't, and the guy came after him, reached for the gun, so he shot him. So, I mean, at that point, it's kind of like, yeah, you know. So, and that's where I see it, and I think a lot of people are screaming about the judge was biased and, you know, this and that. But like the judge, in some of his verbiage and things like that, I think seemed overly sympathetic to Rittenhouse. But based on my understanding of like sort of motions and whatnot granted to the prosecution, that like you know, he wasn't that far out of line with anything. So I don't think he was as overly biased as a lot of people, you know, narrative wise, are saying some. You're asking, I don't know if that's. Okay, I'm doing a show. I'm not going to read the texts. All right. Sorry, that's bad television. Nobody wants to see that. They want to see my shining face speak instead. Let's move on. I was hoping we were going to have a couple other people in here to discuss this one, but we're going to talk about the Aubrey murder trial / verdict. So, and here is sort of the interesting salient questions that I have to my lawyer friends who have joined us. So Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William Bryan were all found guilty of felony murder, looks like aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. But only Travis McMichael, he's the one who shot him, is guilty of malice murder. What is malice murder? Can anybody help me? Like, how is that just different? And I know what felony murder is that if you are committing other crimes or kind of taking part in this, even not directly the one pulling the trigger, in a murder, you'll still get slapped with felony murder. That's what felony murder is.
So
I'm explaining things to lawyers like I know better. Sorry.
Every state gets to codify their murder laws. Some states use first degree, second degree, third degree. Some use this malice model. Some just say, hey, did you kill someone on purpose? So malice murder is the idea that you killed someone with the intent to kill them and you didn't have an excuse to do so.
Gotcha.
I mean, I kind of think that it's odd that the other two were charged with malice murder since they weren't the ones that actually fired the shot. But the felony murder laws say that if you are involved in the commission of a crime and a murder is committed during that crime, then you can also be held responsible for that murder. In this case, it seemed I really don't like felony murder laws. The classic example is the getaway driver. Right. The getaway driver is just there to take the people away from the bank robbery. And someone inside the bank shoots a cop or a bystander, and that person dies. Now you charge the getaway driver with felony murder because they intentionally were involved in this scheme to rob the bank. And hey, somebody died. In this case, I mean, these three people all chased down this one man who was running through a neighborhood, and one of them murdered him. Yeah. It's as clear cut an example as you can possibly come across. I mean, if felony murder is a good law, then this is where it should be applied. I believe that I believe the difference between the two under state law is that you can get parole after 25 years on felony murder, and there is no parole for malice murder. That's the consequential difference as to whether or not it'll make a difference to any of these defendants. I
gotcha.
Don't imagine that it will.
Yeah, and I think that there is kind of universal consensus. I've seen very little pushback against these verdicts from anybody, just because of how egregious it is. And that's a nice little moment of unity, right? In our great republic, they say, yeah, these guys, they chased him down, they trapped him, they cornered him, and when he turned, I guess in self-defense, and then the Travis guy killed him. Yeah, and now they're all going away.
I don't understand how their narrative of citizens' arrest was going to be compelling at all. I thought it was a loser from the beginning. This was very clear-cut homicide and premeditated homicide.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I think the citizens' arrest law got repealed in kind of the interim between, when this happened and when it hit trial, just because it's embarrassingly bad. But yeah, I mean, whatever excuse that they may have had, that maybe he went onto like a construction site or something like that, and there was complaints of robbery or whatever. Like, that's not an excuse to chase somebody down in a couple of trucks, like it's the 60s or something, and you're not going to make the parish line. Like, that's kind of what happened here. Yeah. So, any other thoughts or anything anybody wants to add to that?
I think that it's unfortunate that there was such anxiety over this verdict because, as you just said, it seemed incredibly clear cut. I
Yep.
mean, there was video from one of the defendants that
Yeah.
showed the murder. Like if the third party, the non-related guy, had gotten off on some technicality, I mean, I guess that could have happened. Obviously,
Mhm.
didn't. But this idea that you're gonna, say, I see someone running through my community, I am going to chase him down, corner him, hold him at gunpoint, and then when he tries to escape, shoot him and use his attempted escape as some sort of a
Like self-defense kind of
like
thing.
a sideways, into
Yeah.
self-defense. It simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that we've reached a point in the American criminal justice system that so much of the country was holding its breath over this. And I think that part of that was the Kyle Rittenhouse thing.
Yeah.
I think that the proximity probably
I
didn't.
think part of it was Trayvon Martin.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that you can go back. I'm saying I think some of the direct anxiety was over the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, because I think a lot of people expected there to be violence after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, and I mean there wasn't any significant violence, but it was, well, are we just going to go 0 for 2 on this? And that suggests a very deep distrust of the American justice system. And I think that's really unfortunate, because taken outside of context, outside of anything else that's happened, this case, as Brian said, was pretty clear homicide. And they were throwing out fishing lines for things like, well, there's a citizen's arrest law, and once you take that into account, maybe we should be treated like cops, and then we should have the reasonable ability to say we have the right to hold this person. I mean, it was a stretch.
Were they going for qualified immunity or like?
No.
I think the reason why they
That was a
went
joke,
that
folks.
route was because there's video. I think the reason why they went that route is because there's video. That I think my general takeaway from it was film everything,
Yeah.
and because without that, I don't think we'd have this verdict without that video. That
No.
They released themselves, and then they have to come up with a narrative of citizen's arrest, because I mean, think about George Zimmerman. That was what he was doing too. Guess what? He's not in jail.
Yeah.
And you had the back.
There's
you
no
also,
video in that case.
Yeah, and you had the background in this case of the fact that these men were not arrested for weeks and 7 weeks after the incident itself. You now have the prosecutor there with criminal charges for avoiding charging
bringing the
people
case.
that they knew, that they knew personally. I mean, there is a lot of sort of inside baseball problems there, but taken just on its face, it was a clear homicide. The jury seemed to understand that. It came to a relatively quick conclusion. Felony murder laws being what they are, felony murder was definitely appropriate here under the law as written, and that's what came down. So you got one malice murder because the guy who shot a guy who was running through his neighborhood. You're not allowed to do that. And the two people that helped chase him down were involved in that scheme. So
step back into the bigger picture real quick, the sociological picture. And one of my guilty pleasures is watching Karen videos on Reddit. And I think that the empowerment we've seen among, I'm not sure how to phrase the culture that feels that it's completely appropriate for them to culturally police the people around them has absolutely exploded in recent years. Or maybe just the tools for documenting it has exploded in recent years. But I think that this is the most extreme, one of the most extreme examples of the same woman harassing the guy in that park in New York.
Oh yeah, I
Or,
remember that.
you know, woman harassing a couple guys in a parking lot in California. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a trend.
I guess I wonder what do you owe that more to? Is it just we have better ability to document things that have already been happening, or is there an uptick in, you know, well, obviously there's an uptick in, you know, distrust for government and things like that, but not I wouldn't necessarily think distrust, at least amongst the people perpetrating these kinds of things, distrust for police. Certainly there is more distrust for police, but not amongst the people who are involved here. You're not sure? I've lost your audio, sir. There you are.
I think we're okay. I think we're seeing the nation change. It's a nation where we have more voices than ever before, and more diversity, more inclusion, and I think that's very frightening to a lot of people, and they don't know how to handle it. And that's what we're seeing in the Karen videos and the empowerment that maybe certain recent presidential administrations offered to certain people is what resulted in the Aubrey murder. But I don't know. I'm very sad that this trend appears to exist.
For sure. No, I can agree with that. RJ, you got something, or? Because otherwise, I think we might be able to wrap. If anybody else had anything going on, I think there's in terms of kind of the big topics that we wanted to cover. Going once, going twice, speak now or forever hold your peace. Let's go ahead and call it here then. I enjoyed getting to cover this and talk about it, and we had some disagreement, but also some good consensus, especially at the end. So I appreciate everybody who came and participated and what have you. If you're watching this right now, you're watching it on YouTube. Please check out the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, share this, especially if you've been on the show and you want other people to be like proud of your involvement or whatever, or if you're totally, you know, you want your friends to make fun of you for coming on, share it anyway. Please do that and check out the Fermenting Opinions page, website, fermentingopinions.com, the podcast on iTunes and Beyond Pod. Please check us out. We're going to have more content coming for you real soon. That said, I'm David Poseidon. This is Fermenting Opinions, and we'll see you next time.